Okay, here we go, and welcome to Web Wednesday here at H&H Color Lab. Today's class is on Photoshop Speed Tips. Hopefully this class will give you some tips and tricks on how to be a little bit faster in Photoshop today. During today's class, I'm going to be sharing my screen, so we're going to jump over to that, and it's going to take me just a second to get set up, so hold on there. Okay, here we go. So one of the biggest things, and when I started writing out this class, what I had to look at was there's a lot of things that I just do intuitively in Photoshop because I've been using Photoshop daily probably for, oh man, I don't even want to say how long. It's been a long number of years, probably back to Photoshop version 4, not CS4, but version 4. So however long ago that was is about when I started using Photoshop daily. So a lot of the things that I've realized that I do are things that I just do naturally without thinking about it. Just kind of like when you get into the car, you know which way to turn the key to start it. You don't turn it backwards, you always turn it forwards and you go from there. So it really took me a while to sit and think through those. And the first thing that I realized that I do a lot, and I don't even think about it anymore, is I type Photoshop. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that when I'm in Photoshop, I use shortcut keys to do a lot of different things. I've learned the shortcuts over time, and they're just second nature to me. I read a statistic years ago that said you're going to gain at least 20% productivity in Photoshop by learning how to use those shortcut keys. So let's go through some of the shortcut keys that I use all the time. So we're going to jump into Photoshop real quick. And the first one that I use all the time is Command or Control N. What's that one? That's how you open a new document. So if you're going to start a document from scratch, that's the quickest way to do that. While I'm in the new dialog window, one of the other things that I'll do is set up a lot of these presets. If I can come in and say, what sizes do I want to use the most, I can save those as a preset. So if I like to work on an 8x10 document, I'm going to save that as an 8x10, set all of these options to it, and said, okay, so now I see that 8x10 inch is already set up in there. Another good example of a preset that I would use might be a double spread for doing an album, where my width is going to be 20x10, and again, I'll save that as a new preset. And so now I have those two different sizes in there that I can get to very quickly. So the preset and the shortcut I use together, and that's a real quick one to use. What's another one that I use? Well, the one I use next most often is Control or Command S for save. And that will save the file out. And it's not saving because I haven't done anything to it yet. There we go. The option to that is Command-Shift-S, which is a Save As, and that'll open up your Save As dialog box so you can save that file out. Another one that I use all the time, and this is one of those that, depending on how fast you are, will determine, this one will determine how fast you are and stuff. So let's say I just drew a squiggle on there. How quickly can I get rid of it? Well, I can get rid of it in one keystroke with a Control-Z. Control-Z is your undo key. Well, now here's the next thing. If I put in multiple strokes, Control-Option or Control-Alt-Z lets me back up multiple strokes one step at a time. So Control-Z, Control-N, Control-O are some big ones. Control-S. I didn't tell you what Control-O was. Control-O being open, Control-S to be save. So the way to learn those, first thing you'll notice is if you come under File, you'll see they're always listed out to the right of the menu option. And that's one way to learn them is start looking at those to see what they're listed as. And you'll see under all the different menu options, those are going to be in there. And sometimes like under Layer, you come in and drill down, you'll see that that will be listed under New Layer is the Command-Shift-N if you're on a Mac, or Control-Shift-N if you're on a PC. So start looking at those. If you're coming up all the time and going up to layer, new layer, watch what that shortcut is over there and learn that. There's always ways to do things. The other thing to know is there's at least, the joke used to be, there was always, however many, whatever version you were on, ways of doing things in Photoshop. So besides doing the menu or the shortcut, you can also add a new layer by coming onto your Layers palette and click the new page icon down there, which is another quick way of doing that. So other shortcuts that I use all the time, the next ones besides what we've already talked about, let me fill this, well, these two go together. One is knowing the tool shortcuts. I just pressed M. M gives me my marquee tool right up here. If I hold on the M, I'm going to see that I get a flyout here that shows me I can do a rectangular or an elliptical marquee tool. And to access that shortcut key-wise, hold down the Shift key, and that will toggle between those two. So any of the tools that have multiple features under them, like your Move tool, or I should say your lasso, if you hold down the Shift when you press it, it will toggle through those different tool options. So L is for lasso, W is for your wand, and if you also hover over those for a second, you'll see in parentheses again, it will show you the shortcut key for that tool. So one of the ones that I use a lot is, let's just make a selection here. And Shift F5 is another one that I use daily. Shift F5 opens up my fill dialog. I'm just going to fill that with a color real quickly to show you my next one, which is Command or Control J, which duplicates the current layer. So there's another one right there that you can move back and forth between those. And like right there, what did I do? I pressed the V key to get to move and grabbed that layer and moved it around. Another shortcut is if you hold down your Control key while you're on the Move tool and click on an object, you then automatically select that layer. So if I'm trying to adjust these two things, I don't have to come over here, Layer 1, Adjust, Layer 2, Adjust. Just Control-click on that layer to grab that. Another way to do that is there is an auto-select layers. Sometimes that works great. Sometimes that can really mess you up if you have a lot of detail going on. So the Control and Move does your auto-select layers for you. So go through, and you don't have to learn every single tool through here. I've talked to people. There's somebody I know from Photoshop who has the ABC song of shortcuts. She can do A is for this, B is for that, and I've always wanted her to write that down so I could memorize it. I've never worked on it, but that's one of those pieces of trivia that you could say, hey, yeah, I know A through Z in shortcuts, because there is A through Z in shortcuts. So look at the tools that you use the most. For me, it's the Move tool, the Marquee tool, probably going to the Brush tool, the Text tool, which is T. Those are ones that I use a lot, and so I know those shortcuts going through there. So start working on those. Start working on some of the shortcuts that you can get through the menus as well. Okay, I'm going to close that out. So tools and menu commands. The other thing we can look at to help speed things up in Photoshop are setting up our menus a little bit more efficiently. For example, if you notice when I click on File, I've got Automate and Scripts highlighted. They're automatically green. And when you look under those, you can see I've got other menu commands highlighted in green under there as well. For example, under Layers, I've got Creating Clipping Mask. That's a menu option that I don't always remember the shortcut key for because it's changed between versions. And I also often look for and I don't find it quickly, so I've made it highlighted. How do I do that? Start by coming under Edit and down to Menus. Notice I had that highlighted down there. And this will let you do a couple things. First off, you can say, what color do you want things highlighted? So right now where it says Automate, you see I've turned on green. There may be options under Automate that I don't ever use, so I can turn off these eyeballs or visibility to make those go away. That means it's not going to show up in the menu as a default. Down here, it's going to tell you how to set these things up. So if you want to speed your Photoshop up as well, reduce some of the menu choices of things that you might not use. So I'm going to set up File New, and I'm going to give that a yellow color. And I'm going to also change my Save As here to yellow. So now when I say OK and go File, we'll see both of those are highlighted in yellow. So that's another way you can navigate through Photoshop a little bit quicker. Something that Photoshop also has done in the last couple versions is under your workspace, they have set up a new in CS6 version, and they have, when they do that, it sets up the tool palettes and the menus to be highlighted for the things that you're going to get to or the new features that they've added. So watch for those. It's another way to help speed up some of your workflow in Photoshop. What's another trick I use in Photoshop? Well, that's setting up workspaces. Workspaces have been around for quite a while, and some people use them, a lot of people don't, and I find that they're really useful for a couple reasons. First off, to set up a workspace, you're going to see them listed over here in CS6 on the right side. You'll see different workspaces in there. You can also get to them under Window, Workspace, and they'll be listed in here. So, for example, my default workspace looks something like this. I like to have all my tools over here on the right side, and I use history, layers, and actions quite a bit. So it brings those three things open that I use the most. I have additional workspaces. Say if I'm going to be doing retouching, that's going to open up my actions palette. It's going to give me my adjustment layers, and it's going to open up layers so I can see those things very quickly. If I'm doing stuff, a design or elements with a lot of text, I might open the typography, typing set. This brings up my character fonts, all the styles, gives me a way to set up styles, working through those as well. What's nice about these, let me go into this one, is if I'm working in a workspace here, and I say, hey, let's talk about the histogram palette, let's look at this image, and in the process of going through these things, I open up some other stuff, I bring down another window, let's say we need to see our swatches, they're in there. It's very easy to get back to where I started by just coming under Window, Workspace, and Reset, which takes me back to where I started. The other nice thing about using workspaces is if you're sharing your computer with anyone else, each of you can set up your own workspace. One of the things that's really handy about this, let's come in here and close out some of these tabs. To close the tab, I'm just going to right-click and say Close Tab Group. And let's arrange this a little bit differently. Let's see, I want to have the layers, channels, and paths. Let's bring out our actions and bring it down here to the bottom. So I can rearrange these things very easily. And when I'm done, I'm going to come under Window, Workspace, and create a new workspace. And it's going to let me also set up keyboard shortcuts and menus as well as being saved into that workspace. So that's something handy that you can use to set up the shortcuts. Instead of going to menus, we can come here under Edit to Keyboard Shortcuts, and now you can assign all the different keyboard shortcuts that you want if you want to change those over from the standards that are in there. So another quick tip in there is using those workspaces to work through and set those up based on each individual person. Automating Photoshop. This is probably one of the biggest time savers that you can use. I've always said that if I ever have to repeat something more than 3 times, I'm going to write a Photoshop action for it. It's not uncommon for people to say, Bentley, how do you write actions? Well, actions are honestly, to me, very simple to do because I think to write a good action, you have to understand what steps you want to automate or to actionize. So for example, let me open up an image here, and I'm jumping over to Bridge. Just grab a single image and clean up my actions palette real quick. Just delete that one. Okay. So, for example, I might run a Photoshop filter on all of my images. So I would come up under Filter, ImageNomex, Portraiture, come in and select how I want that to be run. We'll just set that at medium and say OK. Well, that may be something that I do tens, hundreds, thousands of times a day, depending on the images that I'm working with. So why don't I write that into an action? No, not a problem. Let's do that. So the things to understand is you need to know how to do whatever you want to write the action for. In this case, it's very simple. I'm going to create a new action and call it Retouch. I'm going to come up under Filter, ImageNomex, Portraiture. Set that to run the way I want it to look. Make sure everything is set the way I want it to be. Say OK. And we'll see on our Actions palette now that it's added a portraiture line. Now the next thing that I always do is come in and just say Fade Portraiture. And depending on what I'm doing, I will fade it back certain percentages. And I found for most of the time, if I do a 70% fade on it, it just backs it off a little bit, and I like how it looks. So I'm going to press Stop down here on the Actions palette. And if I double-click on the retouch line there, I can now set that to a function key. So I've just set that to Shift F1. So now if I open up another image, just grab one by random and press Shift F1 on it, that will automatically go through those two steps of running portraiture and then stepping it back. So just a real quick way of adding a little bit more automation to the job. Now something else that I could do, if this is all that I'm going to do to the image, I can come up under Photoshop or under File and under Automate create a droplet and set that up to save and close. And we'll show you what this is going to do. I'm going to call it Retouch, save that to my desktop, and turn that on and say OK. So what we're going to see happen I have to move some stuff for just a second. On my desktop now, here right in the top center of the screen, you're going to see this little blue retouch icon. What that's going to do is if I grab a couple images and take those and drop on that droplet, it's automatically going to launch Photoshop and start running that retouch action for me across all those images. Now, because I didn't save any, I didn't put a save as command or anything like that into the action, it's going to pause for this. So I really need to rewrite that a little bit better. But the main thing I wanted to get across was how this action works for you and the fact that creating a droplet can be a very quick way of being more efficient in running through your workflow. Let me get rid of that. Well, let's look at another thing that we can do. In Photoshop, we looked at under File, Automate, the Create Droplet. We can also batch an action, which is going to give me that same dialog as the Create Droplet, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it lets me set up what action set in what action I want to run, where do I want to get my images from, which I would browse out to find those images. I can tell it what things to override. I can say save and close. And if I put a save as action in the action, I want to override that. So the destination is going to be wherever what it says. Okay? So you can set up batch actions to run across a lot of images. Well, that's well and good, but let's say I want to open an image, I want that retouching to be applied, and then I want to manually come in and retouch it. Well, one way that I could do that is to grab the image, open it, press my shortcut key to run the action, and then come in and do whatever other retouching I needed to do on the image if I wanted to get rid of some extra blemishes or whatever. I'm not worried about doing good artwork right now. But let's say that every image that I open, I want to run that portraiture on, but I don't want to have to press that Shift F1 key. Well, there is a great way to handle that. I can come up under File, Scripts, and come to the Script Event Manager. What this is going to let me do, I have to turn it on. I can say Photoshop Event. Whenever I open the document, I want it to run an action that is in Class Examples, and it's called Retouch. So I'm going to add that so that it shows up here in this list, and I'll press Done. So we're going to close this image. So I grab a file, open it, and it's going to automatically run that portraiture action for me. We can see here in my history palette it has applied that. To make this show up a little bit better, we are also going to add another step to this action. Let's just come in and say Mode, or Adjustments, and let's put a hue saturation on there just to accentuate that this is running. We'll close that, open another image, and you'll see when it opens, portraiture runs, and that hue saturation layer is applied. I don't have to do anything for that to happen. It automatically takes place for me. This can be really, like everything in Photoshop, this could be used for good or evil. What do you mean it can be used for evil? Well, let me show you. This is kind of one of those things why I always lock my desktop. So we're just going to do a real quick new action set or new action, and we're going to come in and say Image, Mode, or Adjustments, invert the image, and then Image Rotation 180 degrees. Stop recording. Come up here to File, Scripts, Script Event Manager. We're going to go back to Open Document. Add that one, and we'll remove that retouch one. So what this will do, you're at your friend's house, they walked away from Photoshop, left the computer open without doing anything, without locking it. You run that action real quick. Whenever they open up an image, oops, I still had the same one selected. I didn't get that quite right. Remove that one. Let's add it again. So you have to have, sometimes you have to have a little bit of time to get it set up. Close that. So all their images open up and this happens to them. So if you've got a smart user, they're going to figure out what's going on pretty quick. It's something that if you're a good friend, you'll stick around and help them out. If you're not, you're going to be hightailing it out the door and let them figure it out later. So the Script Event Manager can be used for good or evil. It's also something to remember to come in and turn off if you don't need it. I have a couple jobs that I do here at the lab where I have to do a certain number of steps on every image when it opens, so I activate the Script Event Manager for that to take place to help speed up my workflow. Another thing that can be really helpful is learning how to do some basic scripting. In here I've got some different scripts I've loaded. Scripting is going to be a little bit beyond what we're going to talk about today, but it's something that if you're interested in, shoot me an email. I'll give you some resources to get started on that. Scripting can be really complicated. It can also be really simple. The knowledge that I have on scripting, a lot of it is found by finding a script online and then being able to modify it to do what I want it to do. There's just a handful of things that I use scripting for, but it can definitely speed up your workflow if it's something that you need. Okay, some miscellaneous things that I do to help speed up my workflow. One of them is opening up a lot of images at once. Let's grab a range of images here. Let's say I need to see all those at one time. If I come up under Window, Arrange, and just say Tile, that will group all those together in a tile. Now the next thing that I can do is if I select one and hold down the Shift key and the space bar, I can pan them together. If I'm comparing images like in a group shot and I want to zoom up on one and I want the others to match it, come up under Window, Arrange, and choose Match All, which will match the position and the zoom on all four of those pretty closely. Because I moved the camera a little bit, they're not really accurate, but now I can pan through those and have a close-up to figure out which one I might like the best if I'm trying to pick a best in a group shot or something like that. So that's one thing that's really handy to use. Let's go down here to a single image. Another shortcut I use all the time, Command or Control-0 to open that image out to be full screen. Another one that I actually have turned on right now is Command-R, which is my rulers. And then if you right-click in your rulers, you can change that to show it as percentages, pixels, whatever measurement that you want. A speed tip here is if you're doing a layout and you need to know the center of your document, excuse me, set that to percentages, and then drag a guideline out to 50%. And to make that guideline hit 50% really quickly, hold down your Shift key and your guides will snap to the units that are shown on your ruler. Another quick way to get those guides out there is come under View, New Guide. Set the guide as horizontal or vertical and set the position. It'll automatically bring that in there. And if you're doing this a lot, write an action to do that for you. You could even have that action as your script event manager. Whenever you open an image, that action automatically runs to put your guides in the center. That's great for doing a lot of layout, for laying out text, to make sure all that stuff is set up. Other things under miscellaneous, I use Adobe Bridge, as you've already seen, to navigate and open up images, but there's a lot of things that you can speed up in your workflow by just using Bridge itself. So let's go into Bridge and look at some of those. Probably one of the biggest things that I use Bridge for is for batch renaming. I just did a Command-A or Select All to grab all the images in that folder. And within Bridge, if I come up under Tools and Batch Rename, it's going to open up a rename dialog box where I can come in and specify how I want these to be renamed. For example, I'm going to start by typing in text, type in what this is, and I want to keep the sequence number that was, I'm going to come under metadata. I picked the wrong one there. And I want to use the unique image ID, which is going to keep the sequence number that came out of the camera. I'm just changing the current file name to, I'm going to change that to SCA Winter Sports, so it's a little bit more dramatic. I'm going to check this preserve current file name in XMP metadata, and I'll show you why in just a second. And when I hit rename, very quickly, it's going to go through and rename all 99 files in that folder very quickly. What's nice about this, two things, because I said turn on the individual file name, save that into the metadata, I can come in and look at my metadata panel, grab a single image. If I move this around here just a bit, we're going to see a new line in here that says preserved file name. So this is handy if you've renamed your files and someone else is referencing the original file name, you can find that. But what I really like about it is I now have the ability to undo a batch rename by coming in and changing this metadata to be, it's not metadata, it's preserved file name, there we go, and it's going to rename all those files back to the way that I found them. So it's a real quick undo. Another new feature in this one, I think came in CS5, is the ability to do a string substitution. What does that mean? String substitution means find a specific section of text and replace it with something else. So if I want to find CA3 underscore and I want to replace that with ABC underscore, I can do that. It's a way you can correct spelling mistakes, batch rename with keeping certain parts of the file name intact, shorten out a file name. So if I just wanted to get rid of the CA3 underscore, I'm going to replace with empty. I might hit space and then backspace out to make sure I don't have an empty space in front of it. And again, that's going to batch rename and get rid of that CA3 at the beginning of all those files. Now you'll notice that these are all JPEGs. Something else that I really like to do to speed up my workflow is to use Camera Raw on my JPEGs. So I'm going to press Command R or Control R. It'll open up this whole folder of images in Camera Raw. These were all shot in our 4:6 aspect ratio, but I want to be able to show them quickly as a 4:5 ratio. So coming into Photoshop here, I'm going to set my crop to 4:5. I'm going to press Select All, and I'm going to drag out a center crop, and that's going to very quickly apply that crop to all the images. And I can come through one at a time and preview it, adjust it if I need to, and then once that's correct, select them all and just save those out as new files with that crop applied. So it's a very quick and easy way to batch crop. Another way that I use this batch crop option is to come in and set the crop up. I'm going to clear that to custom. And I don't have the exact ratio at the top of my head, but I'm going to say 3:16 to give you a long, skinny ratio. It's not quite the right one, but that ratio is what I would use if I'm going to do skinny minis. One of our products. It's a quick way for me to crop all the ways through there. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of that. And Roy just asked a question, can I undo the cropping in the metadata? Good question. So let's look through and do this real quick. Let's go back into all these images, select all, crop it, and let's go to that crop right there. We're going to crop it right in the center and say done. And we'll notice that Photoshop, or actually Adobe Bridge, is applying that crop to all of those images. I shouldn't have grabbed all 999 of those, but it'll take a minute. Let's say I've decided, oh, I messed up. That's not the aspect ratio. Can I undo that? Well, like everything, if you know how, you can. There's a couple ways to do this. The first way would be just to open all those files back up by pressing Command R, come to your crop, and say Clear Crop, just like that. If I had hit Select All and your Clear Crop, it would clear all those out. I'm just going to do that on one, so we'll see once it gets done thinking here. It's still cropping through there. Another way that I could clear that crop on an image is select it. If I select all of them, oops, right-click, come to Develop Settings, and choose Clear Settings. That will clear all those crops out so that there's two of those. And yes, Roy, I'm doing all this through Camera Raw, even though these are JPEGs. So the first way to clear it would be to go back into your crop dialog and go under the crop, clear. The second way would be to right-click, Develop Settings, Clear Settings. So that's another quick thing that you can do with Bridge. Another thing that I use Bridge for is coming up under Tools, Photoshop, and do Image Processor. So let me just grab a handful of images. I don't want to grab all of these. Tools, Photoshop, Image Processor, and I'm going to use, oops, I didn't close that out, which I need to get rid of it. I got ahead of myself there. Here we go. Image Processor will let me convert or save these files out in a couple different formats. I can save it in the same location. I can save them as a JPEG, a Photoshop document, or a TIFF. For this example, I'm going to choose two different formats just to show you how this will work. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. I'm going to compress it a little bit. I'm also going to save it as a Photoshop document and set the pixel dimensions to 1200. Now, you'll notice I set both of those to be square, even though my images aren't square. What that's going to do is use a fit command to crop my longest dimension to that pixel dimension. I'm saving it in the same location, and I'm not worried about overwriting my originals. I'll show you why. I'm going to start this running, and you'll see each file will open up and then close again. If we come over to Bridge, what we're going to see having happened is on that SCA, I now have a JPEG folder and a PSD folder that is saving those file types into, and you'll notice that they're still following that same aspect ratio, and they're going to the longest dimension to be what I defined it as. So that's a quick, easy way to apply a bunch of batch conversions that you've done through Camera Raw, as well as resize images down. In addition to that, if you go to the internet and search for Dr. Brown, he has Dr. Brown's Image Processor Pro, which gives you a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more things that you can do with it. You can save as a lot of different types of files. You can set it up to run multiple conversions all at once. There's a lot that it can do in here, and it's pretty handy. So check that out to help speed up your workflow. Once again, Dr. Brown Image Processor Pro. Okay, down to our last two tips on speeding up your Photoshop workflow. Probably the best tip I've ever found is get it right in the camera. That can mean one of two things. First thing meaning do everything that you can at the shoot to make sure the image is the best image you can capture. Watch to move elements out of a background if you're shooting and you're going to say, oh, I can just remove that exit sign later in Photoshop. Well, you can probably remove it faster by taking a step to the left or to the right or raising the camera up or down. So pay attention to things like that. Try to get your exposure and white balance as accurate as you can in the camera so you don't have to mess with it later. All those types of things. Oh, probably the biggest thing to speed up your Photoshop workflow, don't take as many pictures. If you're having to spend hours editing, that meant you spent extra time downloading your images, don't press the shutter as much. Get it right in the camera. The last tip, if all else fails, get yourself some highly caffeinated soda. This works for me. Hopefully it'll work for you. If not, Starbucks is just around the corner for most of us. Anyway, hopefully that helps you guys out, gave you some tips and tricks that you didn't know. There's lots and lots of things in there that can help speed up your workflow. This was just a quick overview. Hopefully, like I said, you got some tips and tricks to speed things up. And that brings us to the end of today's class. I'm going to hang out here in the room for just a little bit. If you've got questions or want me to clarify or go over something again, type that into the chat dialog and I'll do my best to answer it. As always, from everybody here at H&H Color Lab, thanks for joining today's class. Hope to see you in another web class or watching one of our web videos real soon. Have a great day. Thank you.